You want some fast and fun hot hatch entertainment, but you're on a limited budget. Well, this week, I'm going to take a look at the first generation Fabia vRS. The car famed for its diesel hot hatch performance, affordability and low running costs. And I'm going to tell you some of the key features, key things to look for, key issues and problems all around this first generation vRS. Because if you can bang a good one, these are starting to get a bit of a cult following. Welcome to this week's Fast and Fun video. I'm not going to cover the basics in regard to buying a car, but what this video is going to do is specifically pick up on things to do with this first gen Fabia vRS. They were built from 2003 to 2007, so they're in production for about 5 years. Standard pretty much throughout the 5 year, other than right at the end, this specific one in 2007 they came out with the last 1,000 were special editions with a few extra options, but otherwise it was the same car throughout the 5 year period. They are relatively low risk, these cars, because of their proven reliability. Part of the VAG group, part of that PD130 diesel unit that has been proven to do some serious mileage. But there's still ropey ones out there. You go on to eBay, Facebook, Auto Trader, have a look on the net. They're now getting quite a large range between the cheapest chips to the more expensive cared for examples, and that range is extending, and that's normal when cars get to that sort of 15-20 years of age, because it all becomes about condition and history. So there are certainly some things you've got to make sure you check for when you're looking at buying one of these first gen VRSs. The good news is that there's no major big issue, an Achilles heel, like some cars have got. There isn't any of that. You've got some niggling known problems that do appear across these cars, but they're all relatively minor. But where I want to start first of all is actually under the bonnet, and let's have a look at the 1.9 TDI PD130 engine. So at the heart of the Fab vRS was this, the 1.9 TDI PD130 engine. Originally it was the ASZ code, and then later in the last couple of years, in 2005, it got replaced by the BLT code. Standard form was 130 brake horsepower, not a great power output, but what it did have was a huge amount of mid-range torque, 230 pound-foot of torque, and those values seemed relatively modest, especially on the later BLTs, which actually in standard tune many said were closer to 150 brake horsepower than the declared 130. When you start it up, it is a noisy, a little bit unrefined agricultural type of engine, so don't expect smooth, quiet diesel running. It is quite a vibrating, noisy, clattery diesel engine. But what it does have is reliability, as long as it's being well maintained. So make sure you check the service history and check for regular and frequent oil changes, and very importantly, the cam belt. You see, these need new cam belts replacing every 4 years or 60,000 miles. That's not a very long periodicity, and so many would have tried to extend that. Don't. It's as cheap as you're going to get any sort of cam belt, in any sort of local independent garage should be able to do a cam belt for you for probably £400 to £450. If it needs doing, do it, or at least negotiate on the price. And don't let big mileage put you off. And when I say big mileage, I don't mean 100,000 plus. For a Fabia VRS, that I would deem that as quite low mileage. You see, these engines will run for 200 plus. In fact, in other variants, those PD130s can do 3, if not 400,000 miles. Incredible mileages, as long as they've been serviced. And that's the problem, because These cars now, because they're so affordable, because they're so cheap, and for little money you can get some serious modifications done to get some serious diesel power. Owners can, do modify over service, and that's probably the number one risk when buying one of these. Get one from with a careful owner that's been prestigious with the servicing. Servicing rather than mods is the key. The other key consideration is that these are not ULEZ compliant. They're ultra low emission zone. So if you live in one of the ULEZ towns or cities, or a regular commuter into them, you're going to have to pay for the privilege of taking one of these into the town or city centre. And that will surely affect some of the values of these cars in and around the cities and towns. But for us country folk, cheap as chips. You might notice when you first look at the Fabia, there's, well, almost a mini 4x4 look to it. This is stock suspension. That's normal, and that's average. So just be aware, they do sit a little bit higher than one would expect of a hot hatch. Skoda do like to do things a little bit differently. Don't discount cars that have been lowered, but I would avoid cars that have been smashed too low. You'll find when looking for the vRSs, the vast majority will have been modified, and quite drastically modified as well. Personally, I'd avoid those. More the car has been modified, higher risk you're going to run into problems. If it has been modified, make sure you know exactly what's been done, what parts have been used, and who's done it. Because what you don't want to do is go in with your eyes closed and find out too much has been done, the car's not running properly, and you're just going to run into lots and lots of reliability issues, which means money. For me, get standard or buy as close to standard as possible. Now, there are a few modifications that actually are probably worth it. Things like a simple stage 1 remap will take, for a few £100, will take power from the stock 130 to around about 175, 180 brake horsepower. But it'll lift that torque from 230 to around 300 pound-foot of torque. And that's some serious performance. And that power isn't going to damage anything with your engine. PD150 head bolts is another favourite to stop the dreaded head lift. And things like EGR deletes, which is the exhaust gas regulator that puts exhaust gases back into your engine to help lower and meet emissions targets. So a few selected mods are okay, but buy standard where possible. There's not many issues when it comes to the vRS, certainly not major issues, but it doesn't mean they're trouble-free. One of the most common ones is these raw rear door seals. They wear and they let water in, and that water ingresses into the footwell on the rear seats. So get the carpets, lift the carpets out, and get your hand all around the bottom of the footwells, both sides, to check for damp or wetness. If you've got it, it's a cheap fix for replacement seals, but the problem is then you get smell, you get mould build up in the carpet. Next up is the electrics. Central locking. Check that the central locking works, both by locking and unlocking, and check each of the doors, including the boot. And check the electric windows as well. Again, common failures and faults on the central locking and electric windows on the Fabia vRSs. The arches, the sills underneath as well, and the tailgate, all at this sort of age now can start signs of rust. So get your hand in there, get on the car, have a good prod around and feel to see if you can feel and see any visible rust. And the final issue is head lift. And that's what the PD150 head bolts do to help prevent the head lifting. But again, it's because you're trying to put too much bang in that TDI engine. That's why I go back to try to get as standard or as unmodified as possible. More performance, more power you put through that engine, more and greater risk you have when you come to buy one of these. Good news with regard to cost of ownership though is that because values of these hit rock bottom a couple of years ago, many have now been taken off the road because they were worth more as piece parts than as a whole car. So the second-hand market now for spare parts, you've got really a good range, and cost of spare second-hand parts is actually really, really affordable. With regard to options, there wasn't a lot of choice. The cloth seats weren't great, and certainly not great now 15, 20 years later. So if you can hunt for a car that's had the optional leathers fitted, they would be, for me, a really must-have. Or you can go and hunt out a special edition, say limited to 1,000, all came in this blue colour, and again, they go for slightly more premium than the standard vRSs. And values, well, values are pretty much all over. You can still pick VRSs up for probably in and around £1,000 that needs some work, but the better ones now are 2,500. Here's a sort of working level VRS, and with some of the special editions fetching a couple more thousand than that, they're still very, very affordable to most of us. So there you go, that's my buyer's guide on these Gen 1 Fabia VRSs. I think if you buy one well, you buy a good one, you look after it, you service it, come to sell it on sometime in the future, I think you'll find it's not lost much money at all, because these are fast becoming a bit of a cult car, especially with the younger guys. If you enjoyed the video as normal, please thumbs up, subscribe below, stay tuned. Another video next week. Thanks for watching, guys.